decision to kill off any TV character is not one to be taken lightly. Too early and you'll anger fans, too late and no one will care. And God forbid you kill the wrong character, a beloved fan favourite whose loss will damage the show for years to come. Get the death of a character right though and you're standing on the precipice of greatness. A good death, one well executed, well timed, necessary for the plot but emotional and important enough not to look like a cheap gratuitous twist, can spell wonders for a TV show, lingering on audiences' minds for all the right reasons. So with that in mind and a major spoiler warning ahead, I'm Ellie for What Culture and these are the 20 most shocking TV character deaths ever. Number 20, Seymour, Futurama. At their best, stories surprise us, twisting our expectations against themselves. That's certainly what happened here in the otherwise silly Futurama episode Jurassic Bark, when the audience is treated to a montage showing how Fry's beloved dog Seymour spent his final days. Throughout the episode, we're told that Seymour was suddenly fossilized one day and that the professor has the ability to bring him back. Fry embraces the chance to see his best friend again, but changes his mind when he learns Seymour lived for 12 years after Fry was frozen. In a beautiful moment, Fry lets his dog go, safe in the knowledge that he had a good, full life. But then the final scene of the episode shows Seymour waiting for Fry for over a decade, aging and dying without leaving the spot he'd so often been picked up from. And all of this is set to Connie Francis's rendition of I Will Wait For You. Seymour never forgot him, and Fry will never know. Cue an entire generation of tears. Number 19, Reverend Smith, Deadwood. Reverend William Smith was doomed to a horrible fate as soon as he first fell unconscious in the Gem Saloon, stricken by a brain tumour that would spend the next several episodes consuming his once strong and hopeful mind. Deadwood's voice of morality and love during its otherwise gritty and nasty first season, Smith offered a reprieve from the show's darker impulses. His preaching and selflessness, such as when he helps the camp deal with the plague outbreak despite his own fractured health, a sight to behold in a world so cruel. It was inevitable then that something would come to snuff him out. But who would have expected something so horribly heartbreaking? Watching the Reverend succumb to his disease, his senses and faculties weakened irreparably, was a deeply tragic turn, and his final fate, eventually being smothered in an act of violent mercy, was both bleak but also hauntingly beautiful, a balancing act Deadwood controlled impossibly well. Number 18, Tara Knowles, Sons of Anarchy. Sons of Anarchy was never a show short of horrifying deaths, but no death came with more heartbreak than that of Tara Knowles, a woman doomed by her love for series lead Jax Teller. Throughout the show, Tara had always stood just outside of Jax's world, though it was only a matter of time before its violent devastation caught up with her. In Season 6, after a stint in jail and an increasingly bleak clash with Jax's mother Gemma, Tara seemed poised to betray her husband and his friends to the feds so she could leave town and start a new life with her kids. But before she could, Jax voluntarily surrendered himself to save her and their family. All seems well until Gemma comes to believe Tara ratted on him, hence the arrest, culminating in a scene where Gemma brutally stabs Tara to death with a fork in the back of the head, whilst drowning her. It's a brutal, hopeless sequence, but its true heartbreak lies in how tragically preventable it really was. Number 17, Derek Shepherd, Grey's Anatomy. Derek Shepherd was the beloved backbone of Grey's Anatomy during its first 11 seasons. The husband of Meredith Grey, he died as he lived, saving lives and trying to make things work. In Season 11, after taking a job in Washington, Derek and Meredith found their marriage strained and careers diverging. But a little soul-searching led them to beautifully reunite, confess their undying love for each other, and look to a bright future for their growing family. It's a blissful moment in a marriage with many, but in reality it was a final goodbye for the pair. Preparing to go to Washington one last time, Derek saved some people from a car crash en route to the airport and was then blindsided by a speeding truck, leaving him in a coma from which he never awoke. Hard as it was to watch Meredith lose her soulmate, it was harder to accept Derek's death as it happened, since the hospital he was in had numerous opportunities to save him, but missed them all. McDreamy, we miss you. Number 16, Will Gardner, The Good Wife. Unlike most shows on this list, death was never a major part of The Good Wife, a fact that made Will Gardner's sudden death at the end of its 5th season such an unexpected gut punch. Loyal but stubborn, Will was the definition of a scene stealer, and his complex motivations and driven work ethic were easy to admire even when they put him at odds with his friends and foes. Watching him work a courtroom or tiptoe around potential love interest Alicia was often one of the show's greatest joys. In the season 5 episode Dramatics, Your Honor, Will was seen in court defending his client Jeffrey Grant, an accused murderer who, in a sudden and inexplicable moment of desperation, stole a gun from an officer and shot Will dead. It's hard to watch, even if you don't have to see any of the bloodshed unfolding. It happens off-screen, told through other characters' reactions and the lone haunting image of Will's discarded shoe, and is a moment that forever changed The Good Wife and its spin-offs. Number 15. Raina James, Nashville. After patching up a series of family woes and career setbacks, Nashville decided to blindside audiences with one last twist for Raina James, who, like so many characters on this list, seemed ready for a great new chapter when death came knocking. After an intense confrontation with her stalker, Carl, the beloved country singer was en route home with the police when they were struck by a speeding car, which sent Raina to the hospital for surgery. She's broken her hip and suffered a brain injury, but the doctors promise her husband Deacon all is well. But it's not. After conversing with her late mother in a state between life and death, Raina's vitals start to crash and her organs fail. In a moment of pure misery, she dies while surrounded by the family. Raina is honoured later on by Deacon and her daughters, Maddie and Daphne, at a country music award show in a performance of Raina's song You're Mine, which is almost as tear-jerking as the untimely death itself. Number 14. Stringer Bell, The Wire anymore. Number 13. Nicholas Brody, Homeland. The beating heart of Homeland during its first 3 seasons, tortured soldier and potential terrorist Nicholas Brody was a deep and twisting character. At once a broken family man having an affair with CIA operative Carrie Matheson, whilst tentatively planning to commit a suicide bombing. During the show's tightly wound first season, it seemed Brody would go through with the bombing. He even tries to detonate a defective bomb vest, but he doesn't due to his love for his family. In the show's second season, he becomes a member of the US Senate and struggles further with his PTSD and jumbled allegiances, a mental war that comes to a head when he's framed for a terror attack and must flee to Canada. Brody was always a tragic soul, but in the end it seemed he'd find something resembling peace. That wasn't meant to be though, because in season 3 he's hanged by the Iranian government for crimes of terrorism before a distraught Carrie can clear his name. Homeland would never be the same again. Number 12. Zoe Barnes, House of Cards. Before House of Cards became the overblown soap opera it was during the latter half of its run, it was a thrilling and well-paced political drama with a host of characters working against each other, often with compelling results. In the first season, the most entertaining clash was fought between US Senator Frank Underwood and opportunistic journalist Zoe Barnes, a young up-and-comer who seizes the chance to engage in an affair with him to enliven her stunted career. Though initially allies in their separate bids for credibility, Zoe eventually turns on Frank after the death of Peter Russo, a rival congressman killed by Frank but ruled a suicide. Smelling foul play, Zoe works with her colleagues to find the truth, an intrepid mission for retribution that leads Frank to throw her in front of an oncoming train. Killed in the season 2 premiere, Zoe's horrible death came out of nowhere, especially for her, and helped usher in a new era of evil for Frank's political rise to power. House of Cards was rarely this bleak again. Number 11. Rita Morgan, Dexter. In Dexter Morgan's world, there were very few people who could penetrate his unfeeling nature, but Rita always could. Initially a tool Dexter used to convince people he was living a normal life, he eventually came to genuinely care for her, and their relationship soon blossomed into a marriage. Always outside of Dexter's world and unaware of his true nature, Rita was a ray of hope shining through his life, even if Dexter himself was too late in accepting he actually loved her. In season 4, after their marriage hits a rough patch, Dexter and Rita plan a belated honeymoon. But before they leave, Dexter has one last stand with big bad Arthur Mitchell, aka the Trinity Killer, who he successfully kills. Sure, his endangered family are finally safe, Dexter goes home to prepare for the honeymoon, only to find Rita dead in the bathtub, killed by Mitchell in a final act of cruelty. That her death manages to rattle Dexter and that she was a true innocent in his world, Rita's death remains the show's greatest tragedy. Number 10. Gus Fring, Breaking Bad. Sometimes the most shocking deaths also happen to be the most twistedly satisfying, which certainly feels true of Gus Fring's explosive demise in Breaking Bad's Season 4 finale, Face Off. After months clashing for power, conspiring in the shadows and slitting throats, Gus and Walt's war finally came to a head towards the show's penultimate season, as Gus tightened his hold on his bitter subordinate's family and Walt grew increasingly desperate to wriggle himself free. In Face Off, a perfectly titled episode if ever there was one, Gus, in an uncharacteristic moment of boasting, confronts his arch-nemesis Hector to gloat about his recent successes. The meeting acts as a perfect opportunity for Walt to strike as he fits Hector's wheelchair with a pipe bomb. Gus realizes what's happened far too late, blindsided by Hector's menacing scowl, but to his credit remains calm to the end, straightening his tie after the bomb goes off, half his face missing, before succumbing to his wounds. Cold to the end, Gus's demise was appalling, but also doomed Walt himself in the process. Number 9. Jimmy Darmody, Boardwalk Empire. The young protege of political boss Nucky Thompson, Jimmy Darmody was a struggling soldier who, desperate for more, started working under his boss's nose to make a name for himself and set in motion much of Boardwalk Empire's early drama. Though loyal to Nucky, Jimmy was soon torn between his mentor and the new possibilities born from his secret defiance. So much so, he even ordered Nucky's assassination, which, whilst a failure, did succeed in making an early death the only route left for Jimmy to take. In the show's Season 2 finale, To the Lost, after losing his wife and killing his father, Jimmy attempts to make amends with Nucky, but to no avail. Nucky shoots his old friend dead, a power play that solidifies his place as one of Atlantic City's most powerful and untouchable figures. On Boardwalk Empire, death was constantly on the cards, but given Jimmy's complex character and potential, it seemed he was destined to stick around. His sudden demise ushered in a new chapter for a series constantly evolving and made Nucky more formidable than ever. Number 8. Winifred Fred Burkle, Angel. Unlike Buffy the Vampire Slayer, moody supernatural spin-off Angel often treated death with much more finality. There were never as many resurrections or do-overs, and the fatalities we saw carried great weight because of this. Over the course of the show, many characters met terrible demises, including fan favourites Cordelia, Wesley, Doyle, Darla, and more. But none ever hit audiences more than the death of Winifred Fred Burkle, introduced in Season 2 as a rare beacon of light in Angel's increasingly dark life. After taking over the offices of law firm Wolfram & Hart in the final season, Fred and Wesley fall in love, but before they can truly be together, she's infected with the essence of an ancient god, Illyria, who destroys Fred's soul and takes over her body. Throughout the episode, with her friends desperately searching for some way to save her, Fred spends her final moments slowly dying in Wesley's arms. And for any Buffyverse fan, the image of the two of them together is enough to bring a sea of tears. Number 7. Poussey Washington, Orange is the New Black. Orange is the New Black was never at a loss when it came to flawed but beloved characters, and Poussey Washington was one of the show's best. Initially a source of comic relief alongside her best friend Tasty, Poussey was one of Litchfield Prison's most joyful and humanistic souls, offering kindness to those in need while sometimes having her good nature manipulated by the more powerful women that surrounded her, such as the cold-blooded V. Like every woman on Orange is the New Black, Poussey contained multitudes, and for all her setbacks, seemed poised to end the series with a deserved happy ending. Potential that was cut short in the controversial episode The Animals, when she's accidentally suffocated by an inexperienced guard. It's a brutally visceral scene, made to highlight the injustice taking place in the prison, and that it happens to the show's most unimpeachable hopeful soul only makes it that much more of a gut punch. A riot would follow and justice for her murder is eventually served, but 2 seasons later. Number 6. The Red Wedding, Game of Thrones. The overfamiliarity with Game of Thrones' most infamous betrayal has threatened to make it seem quite tame after so many years, but returning to the Red Wedding serves as a quick reminder it's lost none of its shock value. That's not to say the murders of Robb, Catelyn and Talisa Stark, as well as their soldiers and bannermen, is gratuitous. Rather, it's a brutally violent display that is exactly as bleak as it needs to be, and is more interested in the story behind it than the bloodshed itself. After attempting to make amends with the vile Walder Frey, who Robb has betrayed by marrying someone outside of the Frey clan, Catelyn realises far too late that Walder has aligned himself with the Lannisters. Ambushed, Robb and a pregnant Talisa are cut down with their men, whilst Catelyn has her throat cut, crying over her losses. Hopeless and bloody, The Reigns of Castamere still has strong claim to being Game of Thrones' most harrowing episode, and the look on Rob and Catelyn's face as their time runs out is perfect proof why. Number 5. Adriana Lacerva, The Sopranos. Everyone on The Sopranos always seemed just one step away from death. One mistake, one wrong move, one conversation best avoided. But few towed the line between survival and death more than Adriana in the show's penultimate season. Materialistic yet loving, Adriana lived a tragic life long before her demise, abused by Christopher throughout their relationship, forced to cover up murders, and witness to a host of awful crimes. She eventually grew tired of the life she was trapped in and conspired with the FBI to impeach Tony Soprano and secure herself a new life. That's what it looked like anyway, but Adriana's loyalty stopped her from going through with it. Still, when she confessed her discussions with the FBI to Christopher despite never going far enough to betray him, Tony ordered her death by the hands of his right hand, Silvio Dante. The sight of Adriana being driven into the woods and slowly realizing what's about to happen to her remains one of The Sopranos' most haunting sequences, and the moment she's shot dead, one of the most heartbreaking twists of fate. Number 4. Logan Roy, Succession. That Logan Roy's death even manages to be a surprise is a miracle in itself, a testament to the brilliance of Succession's svelte and compelling writing. His death had been teased from the beginning, foreshadowed in the show's title, and yet it still found a way to sneak its way through. In the Season 4 episode Connor's Wedding, the Roy children prepare for Connor and Willa's nuptials, which are thrown into turmoil when Kendall, Roman and Shiv learn their father has possibly died after going into cardiac arrest on his private jet. The episode follows the children from there, overcome with emotion, their unfeeling facades dismantled as they say their goodbyes to Logan over the phone with Shiv's husband, Tom. It's devastating to watch, and even though you're acutely aware of how horrid these people are, their grief and pain is so primal, so human and real, it still stings. It's a blind side, sure, but a stunningly visceral one that forces you to empathise, perhaps for the first time, with people who have never really earned such sympathy. Number 3. Tara McClay, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. For a long time, Willow and Tara had the most stable relationship Buffy the Vampire Slayer had ever seen. That was until the show's 6th season when they broke up due to Willow's destructive addiction to magic. Now, this storyline was not very well handled, too dark and horribly grueling to ever get comfortable with. But there's no denying the power that came with seeing such a beautiful couple torn apart only to eventually, finally, find themselves back in each other's arms. Reunited, Willow and Tara seemed ready for happily ever after, by Buffy standards at least. But in the controversial episode Seeing Red, Big Bad Warren Mears attempts to shoot Buffy but ends up killing Tara instead, ending the life of one of Buffy's most innocent characters. Watching Tara die so bluntly, shot down by a stray bullet as she and Willow are spending a day together reconnecting, is a moment many fans will never truly shake. Willow reacts by trying to end the world, and to be honest, we don't blame her. Number 2. Sarah Lynn, BoJack Horseman. From almost her very first scene, Sarah Lynn was BoJack Horseman's most tragic character. Funny and witty and full of brilliant one-liners, yes, but her chaotic lifestyle and unresolved trauma tinged her hilarity with a discomforting air of heartbreak whenever she turned up on screen. Formerly BoJack's on-screen daughter during his acting days, Sarah Lynn idolized BoJack growing up, but never received the love and security she craved and needed, something that caused her to grow up bitter and addicted to drugs and alcohol. In the Season 3 episode That's Too Much Man, though, it seems she's got her life in order. She's sober, living comfortably, popular but out of the spotlight. That is, until a depressed BoJack ropes her into a weeks-long drug binge, a misadventure culminating in her death after she takes some heroin. Watching BoJack and Sarah Lynn sat in the local planetarium listening to her plan her dream of becoming an architect before dying on BoJack's shoulder is utterly soul-destroying, and is what eventually leads to BoJack's inevitable fall from grace years later. Number 1. Jack Pearson, This Is Us. We learn that Jack Pearson is dead over a season before we actually see him die, and the exact nature of his death is kept vague until we do. How he dies hangs over his family and This Is Us like a spectre, an event they have silently agreed to leave unspoken. When it finally is revealed how Jack died in the Season 2 episode Super Bowl Sunday, it's harrowingly easy to see why the rest of the Pearson clan, even 20 years on, can't bring themselves to explicitly mention it. The twists are horrible. As a fire engulfs the Pearson home, Jack, super dad that he is, races to save his kids from the flames. He succeeds, leading them all to safety outside, but then races back into the smoke to save their dog. And then you think this will be it, that he will never make it out of the house. But then he does, with the dog. Super Dad! All is well, but the death is still coming. And when it eventually hits, delivered as an off-screen heart attack caused by smoke inhalation, we're forced to watch his wife Rebecca find him dead and cry anguished tears alongside her. It was brutal.